We are excited to have you here today as we virtually welcome Matt Dwyer from Patagonia. My name is Alan Kersner, and I serve as the director of the Temple University Entrepreneurship Academy, which promotes entrepreneurial thinking and doing across the entire university. From our joint Bachelor of Fine Arts with Entrepreneurial Studies degrees with the Tyler School of Art and Architecture, our Turning Critical Thinking into Critical Doing modules with the Intellectual Heritage Gen Ed program, to our freelancing series and mini accelerator, which will be kicking off again this spring. But today, we are here to launch our social impact programming, which includes the 5th annual Changemaker Challenge and supporting workshops, and culminates in the Social Impact Summit taking place February 24th, which includes pitches from Changemaker Challenge finalists and a notable guest speaker. We will follow today's session with workshops in November and competition prep sessions in January, with a submission deadline of Wednesday, January 19th at 11:59 p.m. So please put it on your schedule now. So if you have a social impact idea or startup and are a member of the Temple University community, be sure to scan this QR code to register your intent to submit and receive resources to help you prepare, learn about free mentoring opportunities, and review the submission guidelines. In past years, students and alumni from 14 of the 17 schools and colleges in Temple University participated in our programming, and we are really looking forward to another great year. We are incredibly grateful for the support that the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Institute and the Temple University Entrepreneurship Academy received from the Fox School of Business. So it is my pleasure to welcome Ron Anderson, Dean of the Fox School of Business and the School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management. Dean Anderson.
Thank you so much, Alan. Welcome and thank you everybody for joining us today. As Alan said, my name's Ron Anderson. I'm the Dean of Temple University's Fox School of Business and also the School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management. At Temple, we're committed to addressing social problems and ensuring that our impact in our communities is for the betterment of all. Through our investment in the Innovation and Entrepreneur Institute and its programming, including the Social Impact Summit, the Changemaker Challenge, and the Innovation Leader Speaker Series, we are cultivating a community of learning around innovation management best practices and entrepreneurial thinking. We often hear phrases like, be the change you want to see in the world, or change for the better. But these words are more than cliches. You're here today because you want to see change in the world. You care about making a difference. You're here to be inspired. Patagonia is a great example of how companies can focus on social responsibility and social impact and leverage it to be part of their corporate advantage. Matt, I can't wait to hear more about your efforts at Patagonia to address the root causes of the social and environmental effects of running a business, from carbon footprints to wastewater across the supply chain. Today's event is emblematic of our school's strategic plan. It's a convergence of our 4 pillars. We care about our community. We are focused on being inclusive. We must be innovative in our solutions, and we have to be supported by research and data in order to be successful. There are a lot of lessons that can be learned today for both our current and future business leaders. Part of our school's mission is transforming students into responsible professionals and leaders. I hope today's event will provide the information, insights, and connections to empower and enable all of us to make a difference and create social good. I'd now like to pass it to Carrie Slade, Assistant Academic Director of the IEI and the IMEMS, and Director of our Innovation Leader Speaker Series. Carrie?
Thank you so much, Dean Anderson. Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Slade. I'm an assistant professor at the Fox School and the Assistant Academic Director of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Institute. I'm also the host of the Innovation Leader Speaker Series, so big welcome back to those of you who've joined us for prior events. And I'm thrilled to be partnering with Professor Kersner and his social impact programs for this event. I'm also really excited for Matt's talk because I'm an avid camper and hiker, and I also teach our social entrepreneurship course at Fox. I want to thank our sponsors and the people who made this event possible. We partner with the Innovation Research Interchange as well as the Product Development and Management Association to put on and sponsor these events. So a big special welcome to any IRI and PDMA members on the line right now. Technically, Philly also works with us, as well as the Center for Student Professional Development. And I'd like to give a big shout out to Allison Raymond, who originally connected us with Matt and convinced him to do an event with us. So thank you very much, Allison. I also want to thank Lindsay Clark and her team of student workers who are running things behind the scenes and who promoted this event to us all. Moving on to the master's program that we offer, this program, the Innovation Leader Speaker Series, grew out of our desire to spread this knowledge and awareness around innovation management and entrepreneurship to the larger community. We teach today's professionals about innovation strategy, new styles of management, and entrepreneurial thinking. So if anyone's interested in a master's degree or graduate certificate in any of these topics, please feel free to contact me, or our representative, Millie Sakic, is actually, I saw her on the call as well. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Entrepreneurial Students Association. I think they're having a watch party in our 1810 Accelerator right now. So big welcome and thank you for putting together that watch party. I hope it's going well. All right, we have another event coming up in November, so I wanted to give a plug for that. In just a few weeks, we'll be talking about innovation and collaboration in the remote and woke workplace. So that's on November 3rd at 3 p.m. And then as you can see on the screen, we wanted to put out an ask for you. We have our idea competition coming up shortly where students, alumni, faculty, and staff can submit business ideas. And in order to select the finalists for that competition, we have the ideas reviewed by several reviewers. So if you're interested in reviewing some ideas for us, please scan that QR code or email me, and we'd love to have your help with that. So thank you so much. All right, now I would like to finally introduce our speaker, Matt Dwyer and Patagonia. So Matt is the Vice President of Product Impact and Innovation at Patagonia. He started at the company about 8 years ago in the materials department. Recently served as the head of materials innovation and development. Prior to that, he spent 7 years leading technology development at W.L. Gore. He has a Bachelor of Science in Materials Science and Engineering from Lehigh University. And then for those of you who may not know, Patagonia is an outdoor gear and apparel company with a mission statement of, we're in business to save our home planet. It was California's first certified B Corporation and has a range of initiatives to minimize or eliminate the negative effects of the clothing and gear it produces. It's an example of a company that's making money and doing good at the same time. So I'm very excited to hear how Matt is leading this effort and combining innovation with sustainability. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, thank you. And I'll just say a few things. One, huge thanks to Temple University. I'm a big fan of the work you're doing. I grew up in Willow Grove. I really would have loved to fly home, do this in person, get a cheesesteak, but alas, we're doing it this way. And thanks to Alan, Carrie, and Dean Anderson for thinking I'm remotely qualified to do this. I'll try not to let you down. Anyway, I'm going to take you guys on a journey through various aspects of Patagonia, our history, some of the struggles we're currently dealing with as a company and a society, some of the great product progress that we've made, and hopefully at the end kind of buoy us up with things that we can do and leave on a hopeful note. And I'll just say again, there was no convincing needed. I'm thrilled to do this. And I'm so happy to be here with you. So thank you again for having me. So a little bit about us, and Carrie's intro just bought me some more time because you said a lot of it, so thank you. Patagonia was founded in 1973, the apparel component at least. It's a spinoff of a company called Chenard Equipment. So that's Yvon Chenard on the right. He's getting ready for a big wall adventure at Camp 4 in the Yosemite Valley. And he's putting together what you see on those rings are these little metal wedges called pitons. I'll get to that in just a second. Patagonia is headquartered in Ventura, California, for the simple, pragmatic reason that Yvon and his buddies, when they weren't in the mountains in the summer, wanted to be at the beach surfing in the wintertime. So as simple as that. And Chenard Equipment truly is a story in materials innovation and sport. A quick couple of definitions, because I know everybody's probably got the question, what is innovation to Patagonia? How do you do it? What's the secret sauce? When I say innovation, I don't mean invention. Those words are often confused and conflated. Invention to me is pulling novel ideas out of the ether using design and engineering and science and other cleverness. And innovation, in the way that I'm going to speak to it, is simply taking something that exists, whether it's a widget, a thought, a tool, whatever, and adding utility and value to it by means of being clever. So when I say Chenard Equipment's a story in materials innovation and sport, the pitons, so this little wedge that Yvon's collecting over here, it's basically, you know, a 2 to 5 inch long metal wedge that you hammer into a crack and you're able to clip your rope and your harness to it to be safe when you're climbing. It's a classic mountaineering tool that was invented in Europe and historically was made of cast iron. So the form and the use existed. Where Yvon and his friends applied their cleverness and their ingenuity was in World War II, in the post-war environment, there was a ton of progress made in getting metal objects to fly. So aerospace, metallurgy, and engineering. And what they said was, gosh, you know, there's these big unclimbed walls in the Yosemite Valley, 3,000-foot megaliths of granite. And we want to go up those things, but we can't tow 200 pounds worth of metal pitons on us. We're only going to get about 50 feet up. So taking these new metallic alloys and putting them in this existing form, not only invented a new tool for climbing, but revolutionized a new extension of sport. So for the first time, these folks, Royal Robbins, Tom Frost, Yvon, all his buddies, there's some great documentaries on Netflix, Valley Uprising. I'd encourage you to go check them out. They're super fun. These guys were able to revolutionize sport and put up these first ascents and turn Yosemite Valley, Patagonia, the region, Fitzroy, and a number of other places into the climbing meccas that they are today. And that's what I mean by innovation. Existing form, adding utility and value leads to a new sport. Now, our original mission statement, and I had this wonderful spiel, it was so clean, was build the best product. And you can imagine when you're building life-saving protection to hammer in when you're 2,000 feet up a wall, and that's the only forgiveness that you have, quality matters. Performance comes first. It must be the best product. It must not fail. Now, in 1972, in only 15 or 20 years of deploying these tools in the Yosemite Valley and other places, Yvon and his friends realized that these amazing places that took hundreds of millions of years to form were being irreversibly damaged in just a very short period of time by these tools that enabled this sport. This was the first moment of environmental activism and radical business shift by Yvon and the Chenard Equipment crew. They wrote an essay in their catalog in 1972 about clean climbing, they called it, and they stopped selling the piton, which single-handedly revolutionized that industry. And pitons are still around today. They're still in use, but in no way as prolific as they were before. And that decision led to invention. So you have the hex-centric bolt, you have the climbing net, and you have the cams that are used in trad climbing today, all of which leave no trace. That led to the second part of our old mission statement, which was cause no unnecessary harm. We realize that we are in business and we are in business to make and sell products. So by default, there will be an impact there. And part of what I'll talk to you today is reconciling that point. The third piece was use business to inspire solutions to the environmental crisis. And when Patagonia Inc., the apparel company, started and the Chenards started having some real success, they said, it's great that we're successful. It's not great that we're not leveraging every resource that we have to save the planet and mitigate the environmental crisis. Always make it bigger than just us. When we sit in board meetings with Yvon, who is the founder and owner of our company, we're entirely privately held. He'll sit there and say, great job. When are you going to scale it beyond our four walls? Our version of success is not a new product with Patagonia's name on it. It's a new innovation with another brand's name on it that maybe we helped get to market. So like Carrie said, we're a member and we were the first benefits corporation, which means that by default and by our charter, we have to care more than just a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders, the Chenards. And we have to rank our product, we have to have impact, we have to publish our carbon footprint, talk about the great things that are going on and the not so great things that are going on too. So you can find that report annually on our Patagonia Works corporate website. And also 1% for the planet, we started that in the mid 80s. We were a founding member, and what that means is we earmark, no matter what, even after this last year that was really, really hard, 1% of our revenue to donate to grassroots activism. And I think in round numbers, we've given over $145 million since we started to grassroots activism. So again, putting our money where our mouth is. Now, I love the intro, scooped my mission statement here. And in 2018, we were sitting in a board meeting with Ivan, and he said to us, look, love the original mission statement, but it's no longer progressive. It's been around for 27 some odd years. There's plenty of folks using it now. We're seeing this language show up all over the place. And by the way, we're kind of running out of time. The planet's on fire and we're all hosed. So basically that's what he said. So what he came up with was quite simply, we are in business first to save our home planet. Now, unabashedly, we are a for-profit company. We must every day agree to live in the tension and occasionally hypocrisy that we're trying to save the world, but also having an impact. And that's kind of where my job comes in. But in no means, and sometimes we act this way, but we're not a charity. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a 501c3. We are a for-profit company. So that builds in some inherent tension in all the decisions that we make. But when it comes down to it, whether you're Joe in IT or me in my role or somebody else in the company, you can point back to this statement and say, oh, that's right. This is why I'm here. So who am I? Again, I'll pretend to be wonderfully qualified to give this talk and not let you guys down. In the intro, went to Lehigh University, material science and engineering, grew up somewhat local to Temple, know the area. And I worked for W.L. Gore and Associates for 7 years or so before this, doing various forms of technology development and really living on the bleeding edge of the application of technology and science to solving problems that embody themselves when you go outside and it starts raining and things like that. Which led me naturally to the role that I landed at Patagonia. And where I am today is I lead product impact and innovation. To us, that means a few things. It's decidedly not classic sustainability, and I'll get to that at the very end. But it's more so living at the juxtaposition that I just described of trying to save the planet while being a company that's in business to make and sell product. So that means we have to have a keen eye on our footprint, that impact. It's carbon, waste, it's water, it's chemistry. It's the people who make our stuff and making sure that we have them and their communities front of mind as we're making decisions. Things like fair trade, living wage are very important to us. It's long-term impact innovation. So new fibers, new technologies, new process improvements, those things that will help us continually lead and bring down the impact of these products that we make and sell. And finally, something that we call product responsibility. So we have a team of truth seekers. They have PhDs and masters in environmental science. Everybody and their brother comes to us. We get 3,000 applications to our venture fund every year of somebody who thinks they have the next best thing that could save the planet. And of course, we're the best people to launch it with them. This is the group that we call to parachute in, do some math, and let us know what the right way to move forward is. So that's kind of my world. Now, I have a habit of co-opting other people's quotes, kind of using them in my own words and then forgetting how to attribute them. But this is something that I said almost 8 years ago, right after I started. I was leading the material development team and somebody asked me, well, gosh, you guys have been doing recycled polyester since you did the Sprite bottle green fleece in 1993. How much progress have you made? And I didn't have an answer. And my answer was truly to my leadership team and my group of peers, we have to measure our mess before we can figure out how to clean it up. We have to know the scope and extent of our impact. We have to prioritize by the greatest uncertainty, and we have to attack it like our lives depend on it. What does impact mean to us? It means a whole bunch of different things. And what I'm not saying is that we're going to eat the elephant one bite at a time or it's death by 1,000 cuts. What I am saying is that we have a pretty good spotlight on what's important, and we must prioritize those things in order of where we can have the biggest impact. So we talk about things like resource consumption, carbon emissions is kind of the commonly accepted language of the day, water usage, and not just how much water is used to make a product, but does the manufacturing site live in a drought-stricken region or a region where there's too much water? All of these different things come to mind when we think about water. Soil health, the soil will save us. Banking carbon in soil using agriculture, agroforestry, and the supply chains that we have to actually improve the soil and bank carbon there. And then things like product impact. So we use chemistry. Microplastics is an issue, not just in the laundry, but in use. Everything sheds these microplastics. Waste, so not just when something's at the end of its life, which is important to us too, but every time you have a piece of fabric and you want to make a garment, you have to cut it, and part of that ends up on the cutting room floor. So there's a big waste problem, not just in outdoor, but in the entire apparel supply chain. And finally, we have communities that contain people. They're instrumental to our high quality products getting built and out the door and to our customers. And when we look back, we want to know that we did social good, that we did economic good, and we were able to use our business to help innovate in those communities too. So when it comes to impact and problems, these are just a few, not trying to scare anybody. So another thing that people usually ask is, gosh, what are your priorities? What are you doing now? What's happening next? And I'll ask you to get your kind of Modelo binoculars on like this woman has, and we'll step into the future for just a second. When I talk about 2025, for me, it's tomorrow. My team at its closest to market is working 18 months before market, which means we just finished 2023 and we're going into 2024 product development. So these are problems today. We need tactical, tangible solutions that are commercial to solve them. And then we get a minute to look at the horizon through our binoculars and look at the next kind of round number, 2030. So if I think about 2025 and the journey that I'll talk to you guys about in just a minute, really it's our last chance before this next milestone to make final progress on some of these goals that we've had for about 6 or 7 years. So using the best materials that are available today, we call them preferred materials. That's recycled polyester, cashmere, recycled cotton, recycled nylon, all the recycled. It's using traceable wool, it's using responsible down, organic cotton, regenerative organic. All of those things we presently claim as good. They're better than their incumbent, and we want to maximize. We have a keen focus, and if anybody saw John Oliver last week, he did a really nice bit on PFAS, so per or polyfluorinated alkyl substances, and we use them in durable water repellents. So this is not a surprise for us. I'm happy it got great coverage. Love John Oliver. But this is a big problem. And, we have a couple more years before we're going to meet that timeline, but we're well on our way, which I'm pretty happy about. Plastic is an issue. You've seen microbeads, straws, bags, who knows what's going to be plastic item banned next. But we're banking on a future where today, most of our recycled polyester is from chemically recycled soda bottles and water bottles. Nice clean source, it makes a great ingredient, but what if those get banned? So one of the examples I'll talk about in just a little bit is from one of these secondary waste streams. So something other than traditional post-consumer materials. So beginning to maximize those in our line. This last bullet point that I'm really stoked about, this is brand new. So over the past year, we've taken this programmatic measurement and made a couple quantum leaps where now we have a measurement that lives on the same line as margin, as SG&A, as cost of goods, and represents the environmental cost of the product that we're making by style, by color, by business unit, by silhouette. And it's another tool for us to help institutionalize making better decisions for the planet along the way. So 2030, this is somewhere between here and then. We expect this inflection point where we see our products start to do good. We're not just doing less bad, but we're actually giving back to the planet and the people. So carbon footprint is part of this impact tax measurement, but really laser focused on minimizing that at a unit basis, attacking water through dye. Dye chemistry and the application of dye is a huge use of water in the apparel supply chain. And there are current solutions and emerging ones that are going to really help solve that problem. Talked about improving global communities today again. I want to be able to look back and point to the places and the people that we helped. And then finally, end of life. So we'll talk about circularity just a bit at the end. I have some great scary pics of piles of end of life garments and things like that. But that work actually starts today. If I'm building and selling a product that has a 7 or 10 year lifespan, I need to be thinking in the design phase about how it will come back, how we will disassemble it, where it will go, and how it'll get dispositioned. So this is a big new body of work for us. So back to measurement. I'm just going to share for the point of example, a carbon footprint measurement from a few years ago. You know, there's a list of things that our customers and our fans think that we've been doing since the beginning of time. And that's probably that everything's regenerative, organic, everything's recycled, it's all fair trade, it's all good for the world, and that we've measured our carbon footprint. And what I always like to say is, yes, we've made great progress. Yes, we have credibility from almost 50 years of trying to do the right thing, but no, we don't have it figured out. And I have a couple of examples of that I'll walk through today too. So if we look at this donut chart here, this is all in Patagonia's carbon footprint. So we looked at everything from employee travel to manufacturing, shipping things around the world, our own facilities, including our stores and headquarters, and then the raw material supply chain. And what you see is the raw material supply chain makes up almost 87% of our carbon footprint. Compounding factor, we own 0 square inches or feet of that supply chain. So again, innovation mindset kicks in. How can we reduce this impact? It's not a bad thing that other companies focus on their owned and operated, this little gray sliver. And I'll say that most companies that make apparel, most companies that make stuff will have a pie chart that looks very similar to this one, with an outsized proportion of their footprint in their manufacturing and raw material supply chain. You know, it's only 2.3%, but we still need renewable electricity powering our owned and operated facilities, our Reno warehouse. It's still something that we have to do. But man, when you think about focus, it's got to be on that big blue section of the pie chart here. I'll come back to that in just a second, but I made a remark earlier about not knowing how much recycled polyester we used as the head of materials at a company that's been doing it for a very long time. And that led us on our first real measurement exercise to say, okay, we need to characterize how much we're using of what, by when, and then be able to make a strategy to make it better. So back in 2015 was the first aha moment, more of an oh shoot moment, where we realized, and I'll calibrate you on this graph in these colors, that only 39% of all the materials we were using qualified as a preferred material. And more than half of that green bar was organic cotton, which means that for a synthetic material heavy brand who uses lots of nylon and lots of polyester, we had a whole lot of work to do. And to see this on paper in numbers that were verified was really a kind of a gut punch for a lot of us. So what we did was we wrote a couple things down. We wrote the first set of goals for the next 10-year horizon, and we wrote them to instill action and accountability. When you're going to a designer, a line manager, whomever is your downstream partner and partner in this whole thing, there has to be some accountability that, guys, if we don't make it by a certain date, that style that you know, love, and with all good intentions created is probably going to have to go away. And that's kind of where it started, more stick than carrot. So now I'm happy to share at least that over the past 5 or 6 years, we've made a lot of progress. And the stick actually turned into the carrot pretty fast. We found that, you know, a typical caricature of a designer is don't put me in a box, don't constrain me. But when we layered in this first set of constraints around material selection, everybody rallied. They were like, tell me about my styles, tell me what the worst offenders are, give me the dirty 30, what's left, tell me what I have to do to get a good score. And what I realized was that we're all pretty type A, we're A students, and we want to get to 100% on the grade. Now, science and reality has a different appraisal of where we'll actually get. There are some materials that are awaiting future solutions, but these materials still enable us to build best product today. One thing that we're never willing to give up is quality or performance. The idea that we make a concession for the planet that ends up with a product in the landfill sooner than it needs to be is not a concession that we're willing to make. So Materials like polyurethanes on our very popular black hole line, the luggage with that shiny coating, it's super durable. That polyurethane is currently not a preferred material, and we're working on it. We're going to innovate around that problem, but it's something that's not going to move us in the next year anywhere closer to that 100% mark. The other learning that we had, and as basic as this is sometimes it's easy to get wrapped up in big problems and intractable, global climate crises and things like that. But when you break apart the problem and you write a few things down, make it actionable, add accountability, you tend to get things done. And a good goal is one that inspires action. A good goal is one that inspires forward progress. And it's one that gets you directionally marching in the way that you need to go. Are people gonna, are we gonna drop products that aren't 100% preferred by the time we get to 25? Maybe, but we've made a whole lot of progress, and that's worth celebrating. So I'm going to dig into one specific secondary recycled supply chain in just a second, but while I have you, something I always go through is some myth busting about recycled materials. So there's a couple myths out there, and if you kind of look to the right real quick, once your bottle goes to the blue bin, goes to whoever your municipal waste recycling facility is and gets sorted, it gets baled into these bales and then dispositioned into something. Our global recycling complex either doesn't exist or is largely broken. In this country, only 12 to 15% of what goes into the blue bin actually gets recycled, and that's a problem. But we need to keep doing it because it took us almost 40 years to build that behavior. So please keep recycling. Myth number one, I hear this all the time. The quality just isn't as good. We'll bust that myth through product. Our top technical styles, the micro puff, the torrent shell, some of the things that we're selling with WL Gore and Gore-Tex use 100% recycled materials and are the highest performing styles that we make, and we're keeping moving those forward. But also 100% of our styles, everything we make, contain over 90% of preferred materials. So we use this stuff in everything. Our Better Sweater is our #1 style. We flipped it to recycled in fall 19. The performance was actually better from many standpoints. So myth busted. Myth number two, there just isn't enough out there. I can't even get, my hands in the honey pot. Guess what? When it comes to recycling, especially adding value for waste, it is demand that drives supply in collection and infrastructure development. So and these days there's collection books of fabrics that are out there. They're fully recycled, they're commercial, they're running, they're available today. The stuff is here. So let's bust that myth. And then the last one, which is actually the most common one that I hear, is I just can't afford it. And in some cases, the green premium on recycled materials, especially when it comes to things like very fine denier, super light, super strong nylon, which I'll show an example of in a second. Yes, the price can be prohibitive, but on a whole, recycled materials, in some cases, they're priced better than their virgin petroleum counterparts. In some cases, they're priced only slightly higher. And if you're clever about your assortment, your materials palette, where you're choosing to place those materials, you can afford it. So I'm going to dig deep into an example of products now and kind of take you along the whole story. We have a venture fund. It's called Tin Shed Ventures. They exist to invest in like-minded startups who are attacking problems in waste, water, energy, food, and apparel. Borreo came to us through a Kickstarter campaign in 2012 through a woman in our legal team. She said, hey, this looks cool. We should invest. I think we put in $30,000 or something like that to get the Kickstarter through so they could make their first batch of skateboards. What's interesting is not the skateboard. What is interesting is that this Borreo company, and by the way, the founders went to Lehigh, but I wasn't involved in the decision. So, I had nothing to do with it. They're collecting and purchasing end-of-life fishing nets from small villages in Chile and Peru. So it's not just about the nets. They're providing social value to the community. They're providing economic value to the community. They pay double or triple the minimum wage in those regions where their facilities are located, and they're doing real good along the way. Recycling fishing nets has been tried before. It almost always falls short because the logistics don't make sense, or the things are dirty and there's fish guts in it, whatever. But these folks are able to figure it out. So first blush was skateboards, and I think Jenga blocks, or maybe that was a little in the future. So what's really important when it comes to especially the secondary waste streams, whether it's a fishing net, whether it's food waste, which is a huge carbon-rich source of waste that's out there and is underutilized, is adding value at purported to be the end of life. So Vareo's next big step was getting into sunglasses with Costa. These are available, they're pretty sweet, but you can see this, this black pellet, which is a mechanically recycled nylon 6. Basically, they take the nets, they clean them, they shred them up, heat them, turn them into pellets, and they're injection moldable. One of their first applications was in sunglasses after they did skateboards, which is super interesting. So we got involved. I remember sitting at our reception in 2015 with the founders of Vareo, and we had just made a larger investment in them through our venture fund. And I was like, fellas, what do you want to be when you grow up? Wouldn't it be cool if we leveraged our connections and our global supply chain to see how far we could take this through Patagonia product? How sweet would that be? So of course, we first started with injection molding, and fun fact, in the brim of your trucker hat is a piece of plastic. And for us, that seemed like a pretty good, small, safe place to start. And the first samples that we got in of nylon 6, you know, on the West Coast, they like their brims flat, and Philly, you like to bend them a little bit. Tried to bend it, things snapped. You could cut somebody with it. It was like a dangerous piece of weaponry. So we had to go back to the drawing board, and we did some polymer development. We did some work with HDPE, so high density polyethylene, which is another common ingredient in fishing nets, and commercialized this product in spring 2018. So Vareo went from 0 to 5 tons of nets collected, cleaned, and put into high value durable products a year to 50 pretty darn quick. And what's interesting about this that I'll say is just like Yvonne always tells us, make it bigger than us. We intentionally built the supply chain to have more capacity than we could take. The intent was purely, this has to be bigger than us. It's not successful if little Patagonia is the only one doing it. So let's do everything we can from an activation energy standpoint to make it big time. And we're pretty psyched now. A couple years into it, our supplier has over a dozen brands using this material in their hats. And that was just the start. So another point to make is we love technical product. We love, you know, our micro puff, which is a perfect execution of materials and design into a niche climbing application. Thing's awesome. But we can't overlook hats, tees, and other simple things as places to get proof of concepts, technical feasibility, and proof of life that something is able to be done. So while the brim of your hat, you know, at face value might not seem like a big deal, it was a significant proof of life for this material platform. And again, that was just the start. So where we are today, and you know, hats and injection molding was only ever a step in between. We are an apparel company. We sell products that are made of textiles, which are made of fiber. Nylon 6 has been around for about 82 years or something like that. It's been recycled for a couple decades. So we knew we had proof of life in the product form, and we had a supply chain ready to support it. So now the hard work starts of auditioning around the world to all the biggest recyclers, all the nylon folks, all of our textile suppliers, and saying, hey, we have this thing. We think it has merit. We're willing to put everything behind it that we have. What do you think? Most of them said, no, that's gross. We tried that before. What about fish guts? But we had one recycler who said, yeah, let's give it a go. Send me 50 kilograms of the stuff and we'll see what we can do. 50 kilograms turned into 50 tons from one scale to the next, or one trial to the next. And when it came down to it, and this was a 5-year process just to get to the samples that lead to the product that you see on the right, was a collection of fabrics that were the first ever 100% recycled fishing net, traceable, social good, all of that stuff along the way, fabrics that we're able to apply in our product line. So if you think about 1 or 2 tons to 50, we're now taking it from 50 to over 1,000 metric tons. Just for like a scale of context, you can cram about 20 tons of fishing nets into a shipping container, you know, it rides on the back of a big truck. So we're talking about a whole bunch of shipping containers full of nets that are not going to get burned, they're not going to get landfilled, and most importantly, they're not going to end up in the ocean. fishing gear is the #1 deadliest source of ocean waste. So while 1,000 metric tons on the grand scheme of things isn't all that much, it's a really great step in the right direction. One other thing I'll say while I'm here is that when it comes to environmental innovation, noted that we can't give up performance and we can't give up quality. So a lot of times these environmental innovations, we call them invisible. Our product looks, acts, feels the same way as the one that we replaced it with. And that's something for us to be really proud of, because we've added this attribute and the supply chain behind it that made it, steps in the direction to doing good. Whether it's your baggies, whether it's your insulated jacket, whether it's your torrent shell, name a style, the ones that we're launching in the next 6 to 18 months perform beautifully and just like their virgin counterparts. So again, back to Ivan, preaching his message, this is something we've engineered to be bigger than just us. And while I was proud to walk to our store and take this picture and see, dozens of trips to Taiwan and headbanging conversations and deals and all this stuff embody itself in a physical thing that I could go buy and be proud of, I'll be truly proud when I see the hang tag on another brand's product and I can go buy that. So what did we learn? Classic innovation story. One problem solved is maybe 10 uncovered. Recycling supply chains are really hard to start from the ground up, whether it's selling the partners that this is not going to gunk up their $15 million chemical recycling line, whether it's the logistics, traceability. It's actually really hard to ship waste into some countries that are very important for manufacturing. That was a challenge. And we hit every single wall, and the ones we saw and the ones we didn't see, we hit all of them along the way. Mentioned already, performance and quality have to remain #1. But one bedrock component of doing this work is traceability 3 times over. A wise lawyer and a shrewd customer will ask, well, how do you know? And I need to know. The biggest risk to me is that I, knowingly or not, do something that burns that credibility that we have of 50 years of trying to do the right thing, and we get accused of greenwashing. So whether it's the villager that we made the purchase from, whether it's the person who cleaned it, the container it went on, the recycling batch it was in, or the fabric batch, like, we know, and that is really important and valuable. Lastly, what we found through this, and it's funny, I actually went to buy that jacket and they're largely sold out, go figure, but brands and consumers are willing to invest and willing to participate in doing the right thing. And, I'm quoting Ivan all over the place today, but we had a board meeting maybe 5 years ago, and some folks were squabbling about a marketing spend or which product do we spotlight. And Ivan just kind of put his hand down and said, look, we don't have to talk about everything we do. Our customers give us our dollar because they trust we're going to do the right thing with us. And that was 5 years ago. And I'd say it's even truer today. So this is a great story. Love the product, lots of hard work. But the question you may be asking is, will recycling alone save the planet? Okay, I'm going to go into this next section, harken back to that scary donut chart that I showed you before. And I'm calling this 7 years to save the planet simply because I'm finishing 2023. 2030 is sprinting towards us in the face, and we have some big problems to solve as a society if we want to save this planet. So no, recycling alone is not enough. Again, an outsized proportion of our footprint lies in our raw material supply chain, so we need to attack that. Patagonia has set goals, like other companies, around carbon neutral and net zero. And the problem is our business continues to grow. So talk about the tension that I live in every single day. My job is to minimize our impact, reduce it wherever possible, but we still have a growing business because we're a for-profit company. So this is a bit of an eye chart, 7 years to save the planet. This is a graph of our emissions in thousands of metric tons of CO2 equivalent. That's the blue bar you see. The gray dotted line is if we just chilled out today and did no further work, that's how our footprint would continue to grow on an annual basis. That's the scary line. What if we just sat on our hands and didn't do anything? You see a couple other colors in here. The blue, of course, is our net emissions, and you have this dark green and a light green. I'll start with the light green. So all of my team's work, product innovation, new fibers, new technologies, launching things like Boreo, scaling Wornwear, which is WW, our re-commerce business, will only get us so far. We've done the modeling, we've done the third-party studies. This is what we know to be true today. again, the footprints in the supply chain, this gray or this dark green box here is from a program that we're developing. It's called an in-setting program, which is our own language. That means real reductions that happen in energy efficiency, water consumption, anything laddering up to climate in the facilities that make our stuff. We're actually not that big of a company. Somebody like Adidas or Nike has 30 or 50 times the revenue and materials usage that we do. But back to the innovation point, if we can provide the activation energy, show that it can be done, make it economically attractive, and have some real thump when it comes to the impact reduction that we have, I'm all in. So when it comes to 2030, which is the very last bar here, and I think it's worth noting too, these are our fiscal years. Our fiscal years are a little bit offset from a normal calendar year. And what you see in 2021 is that dip. Our carbon footprint is measured on what we made, not what we sold. And like the rest of the world, we didn't make a whole heck of a lot in the last 12 months, back to my product being sold out remark. What you also see in 2030 is that there's still something left. No company who makes stuff and continues to make stuff can truly be carbon neutral. I know carbon neutral is a term that means you have bought carbon offsets to offset the emissions that your company has. And that whole thing is rife with fraud, double counting. We should be highly skeptical. And at some point, we're going to have to figure out how to play in that ball game too. So, and I promise I'll bring you out of the trough of the story arc pretty soon here. But if we have 7 years to save the planet, we have to do everything. We have to address our growth. We have to address consumerism. I love that there's re-commerce going on, in Rent the Runway and Stitch Fix. Arc'teryx has a rental program, all this different stuff. People are taking clothes back, cleaning them and reselling them. I love it. What I don't love is that it's an excuse for consumerism. And what I also don't love is that some folks are using recycling as an excuse to continue this consumerism. Recycling is not an excuse. Recycling will not save the planet. It takes energy, and it should not be the reason you think you can go out and sell more stuff. So to break it down into 3 kind of easy to digest sections, number 1 is reduce. So use the best ingredients possible. I'm the materials guy. I have to say it, but I believe it. Designed for circularity and end of life. If you think, and as corny as it is, if you think about a bicycle wheel with spokes, the hub is actually collection. It's infrastructure. It's the hardest problem to solve today, and that is simply getting things back. The spokes are repair, re-commerce, end of life, recycling, whatever the you want to put in there. Those are the spokes, but we have to get stuff back first. So that's part of the reason to me why Wornwear is so important, because it drives demand for people to send us stuff back. So again, it's easy to look at intractable problems, large or small, get bummed out, and want to go walk into traffic, but that's where innovation comes in. That's our job. Our job is to be hopeful, optimistic, hit a wall and either climb it, go around it, dig under it, or blow it up. That is what innovation is here to do. And finally, there's the little things like the size of our product line, how you color things, the efficiency from a SKU perspective, all the nuts and bolts of having an efficient business are important too. So the next section, I call it in-setting. That's a bit of a different term than is widely used. Again, it's the next horizon and it's the next big challenge. So developing this verifiable program that enables us to add value and have supply chain impact reductions where it matters the most. And if I could do one thing, it'd be eliminating coal from the entire global supply chain. Coal is the enemy. It's cheap. It's dirty. Even China now is having problems with energy crises, and they're probably going to build more coal. So finally, offset as a last resort. We protect wild places all the time. We spend a whole bunch of money acting like a charity supporting. You saw the Bears Ears thing last week. Hopefully President Biden signed a doc. We were so stoked. And we had something to do with that. But that's the kind of activity that's really important. If we can get credit along the way, cool. But that's not our number 1 focus, is not going for that offset. Going to switch gears for just a minute, and that'll bring us home. Waste. So back to my somewhat snarky comment about some of the recom guys out there, some of the rental businesses. Apparel has a huge waste problem, and it's not just the things that end up at the Salvation Army or Goodwill stores when you're kind of done with them, your ratty t-shirt. It's every step of manufacturing. So anytime a textile goes through a process, waste is generated. From making the chip, those little black chips that I showed in the Boreo example, all the way through making yarn, knitting and weaving, dyeing and finishing. Anytime a textile goes down a line to be processed, they cut the edges off and that becomes waste. Cut and sew, of course, there's a yield to every style that we make. We try and minimize that yield loss, but anytime you take scissors to a piece of fabric, you have waste. And shipping materials, right? One of our biggest problems, and hopefully someday I'll never have to talk about it again, are those plastic bags that your product comes wrapped in when we ship it to you. We just don't feel like it's us. We don't think it's right. And we're working very hard to eliminate those little plastic bags. Back to knowing what your mess is in order to clean it up. You got to know your supply chain, traceability ×3. You have to know where the mess is. You have to be brave enough to hold the spotlight, shine it in the dark place, and not turn it off when you're scared about what you see, however ugly it is. You also have to be patient in order to address these problems. So identifying the waste, measuring the sources of waste, and you could use this for carbon or water or any of these issues that we have in supply chain too. Circular design principles. So if I make a product that doesn't have preferred materials, but I know it lasts 30 years, and in 30 years when it comes back, I can do something really good with it, I'm cool with that. That's actually it working, and that's a balanced approach to this whole thing. Pattern efficiency, repairability, all count. And your partnerships with your supply chain are so crucial. Our top 10 suppliers, outside of maybe 1 or 2, are largely the same as they were 20 years ago. So they know us, they know our quirks, they know the hard stuff we're going to ask them, but they're signed up. And simply for them having our hallmark in their showroom to show other potential customers is value enough for the hard work that they do for us. So a long time ago, we launched our ironclad guarantee. We said we would fix anything you sent back and we would never landfill an item that couldn't be serviced. The problem is we kind of have our own landfill that's above grounds of all of these things that are waiting a future solution. So bags with mixed materials that can't be recycled, or hard plastic products, or all kinds of things that gunk up the current recycling supply chain. And, you know, while some of us are not okay with storing all of this stuff, we're working on the solutions, right? And it gives us room to play, it gives us room to explore. And actually, it shows that we don't get stuff back all that often. This is almost 20 years of collecting. So for us to, it looks like a big pile, but it's actually not that big of a problem. But again, current problems awaiting future solutions. Okay, and this leads us to the new product life cycle. So we have to do all of the R's. We have to reduce consumption. We have to buy less, demand more. Do not buy this jacket. It was a very popular ad that we did a couple years ago. We have to investigate rentals, and frankly, rentals make sense to me from a math basis for very high carbon impact goods that also have a pretty high price point. So things that you would buy might sit in your closet that could get a far more useful lifetime, a better amortization of that sunk cost from the beginning of product creation. Repair, that's our warmwear van. That was in my mission statement pick. Repair is just so important. And if the warmwear bus ever comes to town, you can bring them anything and they'll fix it for you. It's not just for our stuff. Like we get psyched when we see product living longer. Reuse, of course. Wornwear is a platform that we're developing. It helps us get things back and resell them, extend their life. And then recycling. Recycling is truly the last resort. You want to make sure you do everything possible first before you put it into another energy intensive process at the end of its life. So I'm going to bring us home. I know, like, I'm fully caffeinated. That sounded like a whole heck of a lot. And I wanted to leave you with some things that you can do to help. And the first one is be a skeptic. Classic CSR, ESG, sustainability is not working. Everybody thought 15 years ago, if they started putting out shiny polished reports about how much good they're doing, it would lead to accountability, and it didn't. Treat usage of the word sustainability like it has the word sus in it. Second, ask questions, demand more as a customer. You have the power to ask hard questions and demand hard answers. And I hearken back to what Whole Foods started with their GAP program, their Global Animal Partnership. They started putting grades next to the things that you're buying, which started people asking questions about the things that we're buying. Most people thought back then that their food came from the food store, and in reality it came from a farm. So, you know, this is the level of revolution that we need to have. And clothes are the next one that needs to happen. Where was it made? Who made it? What'd you make it from? where those things come from and how do you know? And what do I do when I'm done with it? Ask any of those questions and you are a leg ahead and helping move this thing in the right direction. And lastly, I know I always get to talk about the big scary stuff, but we have to remain optimistic. Like, it's easy to look at these things as intractable, as I have nothing to do with it or I can't influence it. And in reality, you can, right? Whether that's, insisting more of the people you're buying your stuff from, whether that's participating in grassroots activism, whether that's doing the hard innovation work to innovate around that wall, we all have a role in this and we should be pretty psyched. So that's all I got. I hope we can have a wonderful discussion from here, else it's not working. And I really want to hear what you guys have to say.
Great, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate that. So now we have time for questions. We have plenty of time here for people to stick around and ask questions. So I'd love to get you to actually ask your question live. So if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand. If you go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a reactions button and there's a raised hand there. Or you can put your question in the chat. So if you'd like to ask your question in person, raise your hand. If you want us to ask it for you, then put it in the chat. Yeah, Brendan, go ahead. See if you can unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, Matt. I really appreciate it. I remember you mentioned that Patagonia is a privately held company. For publicly held companies that have obligations to shareholders and people's retirements and 401ks, do you think that your same model works where you sort of have a dual mission between turning a profit, yes, but also doing a lot of expensive social good? Is that a mission that can realistically be sold to people on the public market? And is it something that maybe even should be sold to people on the public market?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we get this question all the time. We have all those same responsibilities to payroll, to 401k, to retirement, to childcare, all of those different things, and then some more things tacked on in doing good. And there are some great proof concepts out there. Allbirds is Benefits Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the 1% for the Planet roster, there's a whole bunch of folks on there, including publicly held ones, that are attempting to do good too. And when it comes down to it, almost the sole purpose of the experiment that was started 50 years ago as Patagonia is proving that it can be done. And now our purpose, as we look into the next 50 of Yvonne's 100-year mission, is making sure that it gets done elsewhere. When it comes down to increasing shareholder value, all the usuals that we hear, EPS, part of becoming a benefits corporation puts that do good section into your bylaws. So you get to prioritize one over the other if you need to. You get to do both. And that is a really powerful tool. We were really excited. Maybe it was 2 years ago when Danone, who's this huge food company, signed up not just to do regenerative organic with us in the Regenerative Organic Alliance, but signed up to be a benefits corporation. You're like, oh my gosh, this is it working. This is a huge company and they are choosing to do the right thing. I will say, and this is the skeptic in me, people find religion, companies don't. And it is all about the people in leadership and their mission and their will to have the hard conversations, be brave, and do the right thing for the planet. And, at some point, I'll just keep going. At some point, it doesn't become a choice, right? When I talk to folks at other brands, a lot of this stuff is future-proofing, whether it's your customer who's going to ask, whether it's a regulation or a tariff that's going to happen, or whether it's a country all of a sudden saying, we're not going to import or sell your goods if it doesn't have this attribute. All of those have happened. So, if I think at some point, the naysayers and the folks with their feet in the cement aren't going to have a choice to do the right thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Elena, go ahead. Uh-oh, unfortunately, you're a little bit scratchy. Try again.
Here. Is this a bit better?
Yeah,
perfect.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm in kind of an echoey place right now. But I wanted to ask, would you consider using recycled fabric or recycled materials to be cost effective from the business perspective? Is it something that actually costs less? Or do you think it's possible to get it to a point that actually costs less than using, plastic and things like this? Or is it something that costs more and it takes an investment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get this one a lot, and I addressed it kind of loosely earlier. So the reason recycled materials are of high quality and reasonable cost right now is actually because of the oil crisis that happened in the early 2000s. It became cheaper to recycle stuff and do that R&D than to make virgin petroleum-based material. And thanks to that crisis, we're able to do what we are today. At this point, when it comes to recycled polyester, the green premium is almost nothing. In some cases, it's more cost effective to use the recycled material. And nylon's a little bit far behind. Nylon's pretty energy intensive to recycle. It's maybe 15 years behind where polyester is. So I'd say if you are interested enough in using this stuff, if you're clever enough in how you buy it, how you color it, and how you assort it, you can absolutely afford it.
Thank you so much.
Great. Kunti, go ahead.
Hi, well, thank you to everyone for, making time to talk about this, because I know it is really interesting for a lot of us to hear as students. But I did have like a question / like idea. So when you were talking about the boneyard and how it is kind of like your own personal landfill, I was wondering if you guys had ever considered maybe down the line, like introducing a new, like a line itself from Patagonia where you're able to cut up similar fabric and like piece them together to make a new sort of apparel where it's like unique for the customer, where it's a completely unique product, and maybe partnering with like celebrities or influencers who also resonate with that concept or idea.
Love it. Love where your head's at. Actually, I think it was last spring, we launched a collection called Recrafted, which was exactly that. So we went and rooted through that pile of stuff, getting a little bit of feedback. We went and rooted through that pile of stuff, and we found the serviceable items, about 100 pallets worth, and shipped them to a partner of ours who pulled all the trims out, salvaged the panels that were useful, and we built a whole collection off of it called Recrafted. So I believe that's still on our page. Can't speak to the celebrity thing. That's not my zone, but I love the idea of reuse.
I'm sorry. I don't know if it was part of it, but I didn't see that. But thank you.
All good.
Great, thank you. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, Patagonia has always been one of the companies, like anytime I could do a project, I always chose Patagonia because of the reputation surrounding it. That being said, I wanted to ask, you mentioned that Patagonia isn't the largest company in the industry. Do you think that the work Patagonia does inspires bigger companies such as Nike to do better? And have you seen other companies implement similar tactics as Patagonia?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I, over the years, have gotten to know many of my peers at these other brands, kind of large and small. And it's nice to have a sandbox where every now and then you find a kindred spirit, right? And with the Boreo example, we have several brands who will be following us through our supply chain. We know this. There's plenty of demand for it. And we have some other examples where we've collaborated on chemistry, on new fibers and things like that, or simply seen that other brands adopted after we do. The credibility that we have is not because we build concept cars. So we don't do the piece of apparel in a glass case, never to be used just for the sake of making a point. We do it for real, whether that's a 5,000 unit small collection or something like the Boreo collection that's going wholesale in a really big way. We have the credibility because we prove that it works in product. And that's what gives other brands, whether it's a mill, textile mill in a supply chain, a product, a fiber, it's what gives other brand confidence to pick these things up.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Deja, go ahead.
Hi, so my question is, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
So what do you think it's going to take to shift individuals' approach to consumerism?
I think it is going to take absolutely every tool we can deploy. We have largely society is one that is growing. We are not behaving as if we have no new resources or that we're working on a fixed pool of things we can pull out of the earth. And on the flip side, we have, things like trend, style, all those different things. Great example. So Patagonia has 2 seasons annually. We have a spring season and a fall season. Some of these fashion companies, I won't name them, they have a season every week or every 2 weeks, which means they're constantly churning through trend, material, yield loss, colors, stuff that doesn't sell. And that's kind of the cycle that we need to figure out how to break. One of Yvonne's core theories of design is timelessness. We try not to touch our styles all that often or ever if we don't have to. I think the last time we redesigned our down sweater, which is our kind of classic down parka, was 8 years ago. And that was intentional. We want things to stand the test of time, whether it's durability or whether it's merchandisability / customer desire. But talk about a hard problem to solve. Geez.
Yeah, I feel like fast fashion is probably one of the leading problems with like climate change. And I just don't know how to convince people around me that like over consuming Shein and Fashion Nova it's not like durable for like long term, especially because the clothes are fairly cheap and trends change every week. So it's like you're breaking the bank for an Instagram picture for what? Like after the picture, it's like now I don't want to wear it anymore because you have a picture in it. And it's like, it's not how fashion is supposed to work.
Right. And whether it's fashion specifically or the global industrial complex, climate change is affecting all of us, right? We have a fire burning 20 miles this way that, this wouldn't be fire season 20 years ago. We have flooding happening, superstorms all over the place. We have a great risk that the people in our supply chains will become climate refugees. That is a real thing. And all of a sudden, we are not going to be able to behave that the way we always have. And that's the worst way for it to happen. I hope it happens in a more constructive way beforehand, but that's the truth that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, I do see the questions in the chat, by the way. We're gonna finish up the live questions and then we'll get to the chat. So Zachary, go ahead.
Hi, just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Dwyer, for meeting with us and those who organized this. Been a long time fan of Patagonia products and Patagonia in general. And one thing that interests me about your guys' company is your don't buy this jacket and don't buy this shirt initiative you guys go for, and sort of taking second guesses on yourself on if you really need this product. And along with that, you have your Common Thread initiative, which I love that program. I've actually used it a couple of times. And I was just wondering, like, have you guys considered teaming up with other companies that are sort of competitors? Because you've talked about being innovative and taking initiative for other companies and supporting with, for instance, your caps with the fishnet. Would you consider working with like North Face and doing something as a Common Thread initiative?
Yeah, I don't run our Warrenwear program, and Warrenwear is what Common Threads has evolved into presently. But a dream of mine is that we're not just taking back Patagonia stuff, and TNF's not just taking back North Face stuff. That's it working, is when we have infrastructure and incentive and proper value systems to enable exactly what you're talking about. And we collaborate wherever possible, and sometimes it's really easy to find a kindred spirit, a smart person who's like-minded and ready to rock at another company. And sometimes it takes a little more influence. The other thing that I've learned over the years, and now I'm just making myself sound old, is that sometimes a great idea is a great idea, but the world's not ready for it yet. So this impact tax, for example, we cooked up a version of it like 5 years ago. It wasn't as sophisticated as the one we have now, but it never would have worked. We weren't ready. We didn't have our act together. We had several big steps we had to take before that. So, again, back to activation energy. If we can provide some of that makes the decision easier for somebody at another brand, I'm all in. I'm game.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. Shay, go ahead.
Hi, Matt. I just want to thank you for what a great presentation and your transparency. I just really enjoyed how authentic it was and how transparent you were, just especially about your carbon footprint. I am curious about how Patagonia is sourcing the recycled fibers and how we can track the carbon footprint of these recycled textiles?
Yeah, awesome question and foundational to the work that we do too. So when it comes to sourcing recycled material or really anything with a green attribute per the Federal Trade Commission definition, the government tells us what we're allowed to call things and what things qualify under those monikers. We have to have traceability in place and certifications along the way. So we partner with a number of third parties, the Textile Exchange being a really important one, not just to ensure that what we're buying is what we think we're buying, but also to ensure that the right actions are being taken along the way. So if we're saying it's from a bottle, I need the certificates and the traceability that says this bottle changed hands this number of times, the mass balance makes sense, what went in is what came out, and try at least to eliminate opportunities for fraud. And anytime people and dollars are involved, there's a chance, that something's going to go awry. But again, back to having a trusted supply chain, working with these third parties who all they do all day long is chain of custody verification and things like that is really bedrock when it comes to doing that. So, that's kind of that's where we start.
Great, awesome. Hazel, go ahead.
Hi, first I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I really enjoyed it. I'm studying corporate social responsibility at Temple, and I know that, joining a company like Patagonia would obviously be great because they're already doing so much good stuff for the environment and the business world in general. But really, it's also important to look into other companies and try and be like a change maker there. I know you were talking about ESG and sustainability standards and how you thought a lot of it was maybe greenwashing or just not really up to par with where we actually need to be in terms of corporate sustainability. So I was just wondering, for a lot of companies that are moving more towards sustainability, hiring sustainability managers or analysts, do you think that their ESG standards need to be scratched completely and they should start out with something new? Or should they just maybe try to improve those standards?
I love this question. I get calls all the time from folks at other brands, other industries who are just like, I am at zero. Where the heck do I start? And, the baselines that are out there are pretty good. I don't want to antagonize too much the current state of the world and the great work that people have going on, because there is some really good work happening out there, which is why we shouldn't entirely blow up the global ESG complex. My point is really, though, that we need to be evolving into action and accountability to guarantee these outcomes that we need to see. And the outcome cannot be a report that comes out every year and took 12 full-time equivalents to put together and is beautiful and shiny and full of fun facts. It needs to be that we're seeing progress towards these things that we care about, whether it's water quality in the supply chain, water usage, microfiber pollution, climate, all these different things. So, just beginning the conversation is a powerful thing, right? I'm not gonna shut the door on anybody who has great questions to ask and wants to get it started. But the question is then, once we've reached this acceptable baseline, how do we keep pushing it forward? How do we continue to lead?
Great, thank you so much.
All right, great. Thank you, everyone. So we have a couple of questions relating to supply chain. So I'm going to put those together. How does Patagonia structure the supply chain group, and how do you work with the supply chain, department on the goals? Do you share information about your supply chain with other brands so they can similarly structure it? And then for someone majoring in supply chain, what advice would you give them for implementing some of these changes in their own company?
Nice. Good questions. So when it comes to supply chain here, it kind of lives in pockets. We have material development, which lives in product creation. We have this impact innovation group, which lives with me. We have a planning group that is part of kind of merchandising and sales. And then we have a production group. So supply chain proper lives in a couple of different places that are interconnected, maybe a little bit differently than they would be at other companies. That's neither an advantage or a disadvantage. I don't think that's just a fact of where we've landed with our organization. I think when it comes to the second question's easy. I am the first person to make an introduction with one of my suppliers. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, small cycling brand, where do I get started? I say, you call these 3 people and they will hook you up. Like that's just part of us walking the walk. So, back to innovation needing to be bigger than us. If it is that good for the planet, why would we keep it a secret? Why would we lock it up? My first order of business is to make it bigger than me and make the introduction where I can. And when you're studying supply chain, look, supply chain gets run differently all over the place. What's most important is that you're honest, transparent, and very thoughtful and programmatic about how you buy things. So there's a lot of companies out there, I won't name them, but burning dumpsters full of product for the sake of brand security. It's like, let's talk about forecasting. Let's talk about growth. Let's talk about what we plan, what we produce, and what we sell, and put some limits on it. Let's do the hard math there so we don't end up with that problem. And, it happens everywhere. We make mistakes from time to time. We end up with extra stuff. After this painful last year, we had a bunch of fabric left over. So we took it and we put off some really good projects that we were excited about so we could use that fabric up. Our worst scenario is these things not getting used, going to the landfill, or being incinerated in a dirty way. So really, when it comes to supply chain, get your math right.
All right, great. Thank you. So a couple other questions, and I appreciate your stamina here because I know we have a lot of questions, a lot of interested people. So for young entrepreneurs who are, we have a couple of people who are designing sustainable products or interested in being entrepreneurs in this area. What would be some words of advice you had for them if they wanted to start their own company in the sustainability area?
I'll say 2 things come to mind. One, know what problem you're trying to solve. Many of us just inherently, probably 90+% of us are solution oriented, and I get pitched solutions all the time, shiny objects, widgets, new fibers, whatever. And if I don't know what problem I'm here to solve, what am I going to do with all this information? I fall in love with a story or a narrative, and I end up at worst actually not solving a problem and creating a new one for myself. So that's one, is know what you're here to do, write it down and institutionalize it. The second piece that I think about is don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. So I posted that same picture of that Borreo jacket on LinkedIn. I had a bunch of good comments, but I had a couple folks come out of the woodwork and they're like, yeah, but you're not using the best dye technology. It's still made by people in a facility. And it's like, guys, if I waited around for that to happen, I would make no progress whatsoever, right? So that doesn't mean abandon the problem you're trying to solve or abandon your values. It means be very prescriptive on the uncertainty that you're going after, and know when you're getting distracted and be able to call yourself on it and say, oh, nope, we can make a lot of progress if we went this way, let's do it.
Okay, awesome. Can you tell us a little bit what it's like in the office environment in terms of office supplies, tables, a food court? What is it like actually working in a physical space for this type of company?
I will go in the way back machine to when we were actually in the office. I like came into the office and stole somebody's office so you didn't have to be in my kitchen today. We try and live an examined life, which means all of our furniture is super old. We don't have a fancy, ridiculous campus like some other brands do. We don't have a shiny headquarters. Even our main campus is largely still the building it was 120 years ago when it was built as a meatpacking plant next to a railway station. And like, there's something to that. And honestly, for me, and I'll just hammer on shiny ESG reports for one more time, what that tells you is that we're spending our human capital, our time, and our energy on the things that really matter. And it's not everybody wants to, sit at an old table or whatever, but that's kind of part of it. The food's great, it's local, it's organic. We have an amazing staff that, like, when they go on vacation, everybody starves and suffers. But when it comes down to it, we are very prescriptive around the waste we generate, the paper we use. We don't do business cards. Like, we try and look at all aspects of it, not because in the grand scheme of things, it matters all that much, because it's part of our mess. So, whether it's electricity. I think 100% of our campus is powered by renewables, whether that's by power purchase agreement for wind and solar or by our modest on-site installation. So, you know, we're trying our hardest to tick all the boxes and really live that examined life.
Great. Three more questions, I think. When you're thinking about the life cycle of a product and the end of life, who do you involve in that kind of planning process? You mentioned that you should consider the end of life even when you're designing it, but who else are there personnel or other departments that need to be involved when you think about the end of life, or how do you plan that out?
Yeah, back to measuring your mess and seeking the truth. One of the key functions of my team is exactly that. So they partner with folks like HIGCO, the Hig Index, which is this publicly available huge database of life cycle assessments for a lot of the common materials that we use. That's one of our inputs. We buy data from another couple places that all factors into our model. And probably once a year, we run a life cycle assessment of our own. So LCA work is time consuming, it's expensive, and it's difficult, and it's highly dependent on the assumptions that you make at the beginning. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the assumptions that we're going to make. A great example, and actually we only use that tool when we don't have an answer to a very specific question that we need to answer. So we did a life cycle assessment on this Boreo nylon because the data didn't exist. We've done it on some other unique materials in the past. We got asked, is synthetic insulation better or worse than using down? So, you know, the goose feather material. And the only LCA we could find was from like McDonald's and had to do with farming chicken for McNuggets or something like that. Not useful for me at all. So we had to go do that work and get that answer. But, you know, the data is so important. How you use the data is so important. And it has to speak the truth. You know, when you're talking about a metric, it has to be a real number, something you can adequately measure. It has to be the right number. So one that describes the situation and explains it. And it has to inspire action and outcomes.
Great. What about digital or non-fungible token fashion? Example, having a virtual product release to lessen environmental impact. What are your thoughts on the digital non-fungible token phenomenon?
I have plenty of personal thoughts that I don't think apply to this conversation. Else, I'm going to have to take a pass on that.
All right, no problem. All right, and then how do you tackle greenwashing? Are competitor brands engaging in greenwashing to try to compete against you? Is there anything you can do about that? Do you care? What about that phenomenon of greenwashing?
We try to lead, and by leading, we end up with a target on our back. And when I can never antagonize or fault another brand for attempting to do the right thing, I also can't lose sight of the fact that I have a team of 30 people who live, eat, sleep, dream this work, and other brands just have to take at face value what their suppliers are telling them, right? So it's not like we wake up today and say, how can we deceive our customer and say we're doing a good thing and trick them? Largely, in most cases, it's not that at all, you know? So for us, it's about engagement. It's a competitor made a claim about microfibers. I called my peer up there and said, hey, have you done the testing? We'll help you with the testing. You know, it's not, yo, you were wrong. That's bad. We're going to screw you. Like that makes no progress. And that's just not constructive. So a step forward is important almost no matter what, but engagement and constructive dialogue is even more important as a follow-up.
All right, we'll try to squeeze one more question in, and then for those of you waiting for the suitable code, we will share that in a minute. Do you see a time where transparency and traceability is the norm for organizations? Is there going to be, you know, a new standard where organizations are more transparent about where things are coming from?
It has to be. For the sake of human rights violations alone, you know, apparel is still largely made the same way that it has been since day one, with hands, cutting instruments, and needles and threads. And there's been this race to find the cheapest hands on the planet to make our stuff for the sake of increasing shareholder value. And at some point, we're going to reach the bottom of that and have nowhere else to go. And anytime you engage in that activity, you are exposing human justice issues, social welfare issues, all of the gnarly stuff that comes from trying to solve the wrong problem. Traceability is not enough. You know, at some point, whether it's that issue alone, whether it's claims, whether it's the Federal Trade Commission updating the guide of what we can say, we're going to have to move past simple traceability to verification. right? So how do you know? I have a stack of papers that says, I also have a scientific test that proves. That's where we're going to have to go. So again, it's baby steps. I talked to a brand, this was maybe 7 years ago. We did our spiel 8 minutes in. They were like, oh, you guys know where your fabric comes from. And we were like, oh, that's how this is going to go. Well, let's tell you how we trace our materials. You know?
All right, great. Well, thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. Obviously, we had tons of interest in what you're talking about, and now we're all more educated on the topic.